stopped it, but it still does, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so hello, everybody. And listen, I am happy to be here today. I'm happy for this particular conversation. And I hope that we take away a lot from this conversation. So I'm live on YouTube, I'm live on Facebook. And listen, this program or this particular episode is not just for me, it's for everyone. My guest here would answer your questions. So have your questions ready, and please just feel free to ask your questions, because my guest is an expert at child and adoption advocacy, and whatever information that she gives you is the absolute right information. So I'm going to start now and welcome Ni, welcome. There's quite a few people here, and I want to apologize to a few people that have come earlier on, but they had to go, and I asked them to come back at the time. So I'm going to start. So hello, everyone, and welcome to Ibi Speaks. My name is Ibinabo Enebi. And I want to thank and appreciate all my subscribers and all of my faithful viewers for joining us today. And if you're a first-time viewer and you're wondering what this channel is all about, I'm going to tell you, this channel is all about motivating, inspiring, informing you to make better decisions and choices in your life. And I do this by featuring everyday people like you and me, thought leaders, experts, to share their stories and their expertise, because I believe that collectively that our voices and expertise serve as streetlights and survival kits for those who are coming behind us. And today on Ibi Speaks, we're going to be talking about the joy of adoption. And to do justice to this conversation is my sister and friend, Mrs. Eme Akenzua.
Thank you, Ivy. It's a great pleasure to be here.
Thank you. And listen, guys, yeah, so this noise just upsets me anyway. So if you're because I've tried to adjust it, but it's not adjusting. So let's forget about the noise and listen. If you're thinking about adopting a child but don't know how to go about it, this episode is for you. And if you have already adopted a child but need proper guidelines on how to assimilate the child into your family, please stay tuned and listen. You can be a part of this conversation by leaving your questions in the comment box if you're watching via Facebook, if you're watching via YouTube, and I will read out those questions, and my guest will answer the questions. And listen, you can subscribe to my YouTube channel, Ibinabo Enebi, and you can follow me on my social media handles, Ibinabo Enebi, Instagram, Facebook, and you can also check out my website, ibinaboenebi.com. Now, before I go into this conversation proper, I'd like to talk a little bit about my special guest, Mrs. Eme Odo Akenzua. She is a wife, a mother, a social reformer, an author, and social entrepreneur. She holds a Bachelor of Arts degree from the University of Ibadan in Nigeria, from where she proceeded to study millinery in the UK. Did I pronounce that right?
Yeah.
Okay. Side by side her thriving fashion business, Eme is actively and passionately involved in the welfare of orphans and vulnerable children. She is driven by the need to ensure that every OVC, which is the orphaned and vulnerable child in Nigeria, has access to life's necessities, including being in the care of loving parents through adoption where the need arises. Eme is at the forefront of pioneering the work on educating people on the benefits of adoption in Nigeria through the joy of adoption platforms and books. And she's been managing trustee of Heritage Homes Orphanage Lagos since its inception in 2002, and she's jointly started our Heritage Adoption Support and Advocacy Group, HASAAG, in 2016. Heritage Homes has affected lives of thousands of OVCs, and HOSAG is involved in demystifying adoption and advocating for better adoption laws, processes, and procedures in Nigeria. All in all, Eme feels privileged to be able to work in the diverse worlds of glamour and poverty, respectively, and she sees herself as a lending hand in both worlds. And in one, she helps people look more beautiful, and on the other, she helps restore life and dignity. And I must also add that she has a great heart. Now, should I call you Eme? Should I call you Mrs. Akenzua? I want to like.
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay, so I was just reading through your profile, and I see that you're very passionate about the orphaned and vulnerable children, and you are a pioneer on the work of educating people on the benefits of adoption in Nigeria, and also pushing for the demystification of adoption. Let's talk about, first and foremost, the benefits of adoption.
Maybe there's several benefits in adopting a child. One of such benefits is you can grow your family. If you already have children and you have secondary infertility issues, you can grow your family by adopting a child. And if you have not been able to have a child for whatever reason, adoption is beneficial to you also. I found this on the web. I'm sorry, I have this iPad that picks up everything I see. So
yeah, we can just lower it. It's fine.
I will just put it up. Yes. So yes, another benefit of adoption is you don't even have to have an issue having a child to adopt a child. There's so many children out there, wonderful, lovely children who have come into this world, not because they asked to come into the world, but somehow have found themselves here. I think they deserve a home, and God feels they deserve a home. When you take one of these children into your home, I think the part of the scriptures that says that you, I'm sorry about this.
It's fine. It's the gremlins now of technology, artificial intelligence, yeah?
Coming up. Yes, that when you fed me, when I was hungry and you fed me, when I was thirsty, you gave me to drink. When you did it for any one of these little ones, you did it for me. So you also are in a position to be blessed by God when you adopt a child, because you have literally taken Jesus into your house by taking one of these little angels. So God will bless you. That's another benefit of adopting a child. And of course, you help to clean up society. Every adult who is a nuisance in society is so because they never got into a loving home where they could be cared for. You'll be amazed what happens when you take a child and put the child in a loving environment and take care of the child. The potentials, the possibilities are unlimited when you do so. I've seen it over and over in the work that I do at the Heritage Homes Orphanage. We have a baby who comes in maybe in a cellophane bag, soldier ants all over the baby, and such a mess. You wouldn't want to have anything to do with that child. Now, fast forward 2 weeks after that, somebody walks in, or people who potential
parents,
donors, the orphanage, and they're like, oh my God, can I have this baby? She's so cute, she's so this, she's so that. That's just because the child has been moved into a conducive environment, and everything changes. So there's so many benefits with having one of these children in your home. God will bless you.
Fantastic. And, I know that you're very passionate about, listen, even from the way that you speak about the benefits of adoption, and then you alluded to the fact that when you do that, you're actually doing the will of God, really. Because if you look at adoption, spiritually speaking, I mean, listen, the Bible also tells us that we are adopted into the kingdom of God, really, into the household of faith. So adoption then would also have a spiritual significance, and God basically then has a heart for adoption. Yeah?
Oh, absolutely. Adoption wasn't man's idea at all. It started with God. If you're a Bible-believing Christian, you would understand that you were adopted by God. We were not God's initial plan. It was Israel that he had chosen to manifest himself through on the earth. But, things happened, and God decided to adopt us into his family. So it's God's idea. Adoption is so close to God's heart that he decided to send his only begotten son, Jesus, through adoption and biologically. I know that people go, oh my God, but it's true. Joseph was not his biological father. We all know the story about the birth of Jesus. Mary was his biological mother, but he was conceived by the Holy Spirit. And we know that Joseph was about to throw him out because of this, but thank God he didn't, because he provided that shelter, that dignity that Jesus needed to live in, when he was here on earth. Imagine if Joseph could not understand the concept. He had so much of God that he understood the concept of adoption and took that child in. The child was born in his house. So many of us came into adoption only because we had challenges. But it's just one of the ways that God has decided to send children to families.
Fantastic. I was in one of your programs, was it 2 years ago? And I don't know if, I have a question here for you, but I'm just going to say this. And I just want to reiterate the fact that, one of your speakers, I don't know if it was you or one of the speakers, said that adoption is also one of the ways in which we grow our families. And you have also reiterated that fact as well. Now, there's a question here that I want to ask you, because today's episode basically is about people asking questions, and say, let the speaker help us understand first what adoption means, which she has, and then what's the difference between adoption and foster parents. So somebody...
Okay, yes, basically, adoption is when you legally take in a child under your care and assume all parental responsibilities towards that child. So adoption is forever. Whereas with fostering is when a family steps in, or an individual steps in to have a child for a limited period of time. And that could be from a few days to several years. And in some cases, the child is eventually adopted by the foster parents. But with fostering, it's not a permanent situation. It's just that you take charge for a period of time within which the child is, for whatever reasons, could be settled into another home. Maybe there's an unresolved situation in the child's family and they need shelter. The state needs shelter for the child for a period of time. So you take that child in, take care of the child. The state would usually support you in taking care of the child. Now, we do not practice fostering in Nigeria yet. We're still working on the government to do this, but there are all kinds of social issues that have not made it possible so far. But adoption is practiced in Nigeria, fostering not yet. But of course, in the UK where you are, or in Ireland, I'm sure there is
internationally, yeah, there's fostering, and yeah. So thank you very much for that question, and thank you very much, Eme, for that answer. Now, I want us to go back to this whole idea of when you talk about the beauty of adoption and how adoption is God's heart, I just saw you just light up. Now, again, but then that light up, then I remember again, but then why is there so much stigmatization of adoption in Nigeria? And why, and then what are you doing about it? And how are you going about just helping to destigmatize this whole thing, in people's minds?
There is no doubt that there's stigmatization still associated with adoption in Nigeria. And that's for several reasons. I think first and foremost, the fact that most people who want to adopt children are women or couples who are barren, So first there's a stigma, having a child is supposed to be one of the natural things that every woman should be able to do. So when you cannot do it, unfortunately, our society stigmatizes you, which is so sad, because there is no woman who wants to be barren, just, like that. It's something that happens for whatever reason. So it is very sad that society, what's the word now?
Stigmatizes, looks down on women that can't have children, yeah?
In society. The other stigma would be that I think why people stigmatize adoption is the fact that they often say, where is the child from? We don't know who this child is. It's a mad woman's child that you brought into your house. Again, unfortunately, in most cases with adoption in Nigeria, children are abandoned on the streets, which takes away some dignity from this process. Whereas in the West, the government has made it dignified for people to come in and drop their children without feeling bad about that. When you drop a child on the street already, you stigmatize that child. So when you bring a child like that into a home, people look at things differently. But if we had a system, which is part of what we're fighting to do, where you are not looked at funny because you have decided to give up your child, people do so for various reasons. And it's not always because they are irresponsible. Sometimes it's just because they're ill, they don't have the financial means to care for the child. And I think it's honorable to accept that you cannot do that and you need to place the child in a safe environment. So we should encourage people like that. I do know that there's another side of that where irresponsible parents who do not want to take that responsibility would also just dump their children. But there is a balance and we can find that balance.
Fantastic. Now, again, thank you very much for sharing light on that situation where like you rightly said, it's just the stigmatization that goes on. And so when people adopt a child, they're like, so who is this child coming from? And, some people feel that when you adopt a child, that child could come into the family and then cause problems, in future, so those are the kind of things that people are scared of. And like you said,
Yes, sorry, go on. Sorry to have put it in.
Yes, and they're like, so who is, in Africa or in our culture, we're very particular about ancestry. What yoke does this child come with? What are the family beliefs does this child come with? If I bring an adopted child into my home, how do I deal with the spiritual interfaces or the things that are going to happen in future that I don't know about? I suppose those are some of the things that people are worried about. And as an adoption advocate and someone who is heavily involved as the managing partner of Heritage Homes, how do you address that, in the sense that I'm sure that you've had children that are there that that are doing well in spite of how they got in there?
Oh, yes, definitely, Ivy. I think it comes from a lot of ignorance, and that's why we do the advocacy work that we do. A child is a child is a child. All children are the same. The only difference between these children and the children we have in our homes is the fact that they were just not born into the environment that they perhaps should have been born into. About children who are adopted not coming with history, that happens sometimes. It's not all the time, but it does happen sometimes. And what I say to people when people say, "Oh, what if it's a mad person's child?" I say, "What do you know about your forebears, the people who were your great grandfather? You don't know anything." It's usually when there's an issue. Let's say you have a mental breakdown, then investigations begin and the doctors are asking questions. Is there this history in your family? And of course, your immediate, your parents didn't have that. So, you don't know. But then one old auntie now tells you that, oh, there was somebody in the family about 3-4 generations back who had this. That's when you know. So,
Yeah.
Whether the child is adopted or not, the issues we face even with our biological children. A child grows up, and then suddenly a friend, her son had cancer at the age of 16. Now, that's a biological child. What do? You get down on your knees and you pray. If God has given you this child, God has a solution for the challenges that you will face with the child. But having said so, in the Heritage Homes Orphanage, and we try and preach this to other orphanages, when a mother comes in to give up her child, please get as much history as you can from that mother before she goes, because she's coming herself to give the child up. In the case where a child is found on the streets, it's a different situation. We trust God. We trust the same God that we trust with our biological children, and pray when we have challenges, immune from problems in this life. So let's not isolate the adopted child and say, oh, I'm not sure. If you start the process of adoption with that fear, I can assure you that your fears will come to pass. The Bible says what Job feared the most was what came upon him. But if you come into it with a very clean and pure heart, just the same way as Joseph, the adoptive father of Jesus, did, and just expect the best. Expect all that you desire from God for that child, and that's exactly what you would receive. So there's no fear about history. Trust God. When you go to the orphanage to adopt a child, just make sure you get as much history as you can about the child. And the rest, we have to leave to God, just as we do with our biological children.
Fantastic. And that brings me to the next question now. Assuming somebody is watching and is looking to adopt a child, and I'm going to say this because there's a lot of there's a lot of dodgy adoption processes that go on. There's some people that fake pregnancies, and even just there was a guest that came here one time that was telling us a story about how his wife was believing for a child, and she went to a hospital and the doctor was actually injecting them with hormones. They didn't know, but the tummy was big, the tummy was growing, and she didn't know, and until they realized that it was a scam. But some people know that it's a scam and then still go ahead to go through those dodgy processes because they're ashamed and they don't want people to know. But for those people who want to do things properly, what is the legal process of adopting a child in Nigeria?
Okay. Before I get into that, let me address what you've just spoken about. What people do. These are real issues that we encounter. We have people who come into the Heritage Homes Orphanage with big bellies and they're asking to adopt. I remember the first encounter I had with such a person. I couldn't understand. I said, Madam, why would you want to adopt a child now? I mean, you can do it after you've had the baby you're carrying. And she smiled and she says, can I let the other people leave the room? And then she mentions that she wasn't pregnant, but they had been asked to do this by people in position of authority, I wouldn't mention. And we said to her, listen, there's no they're doing. So if you want to adopt a child from heritage homes. You will need to go back home and take that, whatever you put in your tummy, out. There's nothing shameful about what we're doing here. This is what God has called us to do. How can there be shame in the way God sent his son Jesus into the world through an adoptive father, Joseph? How can there be shame in what happened to Moses, who was taken into Pharaoh's house, adopted by Pharaoh's daughter? There's no shame in adoption. What about Esther, who delivered God's people from annihilation? She was adopted by Mordecai. Was there shame in that? There is no shame in adoption. So, yes, I understand how society looks at adoption here in Nigeria, but if you and I continue to hide, continue to do all of these crazy things, then there will be no change. We have a responsibility to speak openly about adoption, educate the people around us, encourage women who are waiting on God for children to adopt if they want to. Don't push anybody into it. Adoption is not for everybody. You don't want a situation where somebody takes a child. You know, people will call me and talk to this person about adoption. And I go, well, has she gotten to that point? I can speak about the benefits of adoption and encourage her, but I cannot force anyone to adopt, because adoption is not for everybody. There are people who've been honest enough to say to me, I cannot love a child who's from somebody else the way I've loved mine. And I respect those people. The people I have a problem with is those who bow to societal pressure to take a child into their home and maltreat the child. That is a no-no. It's better to stay where you are and just find another method of getting the child into your home. Now, going into how the procedure for adopting children, I can only speak about Lagos State, where we have practiced, or where we continue to practice. We're licensed to have a home here in Lagos State. So the laws in Nigeria, there are no uniform procedures and processes for adopting. Every state has their own process and procedure. So, but in Lagos State, I will just refer to one or two things here. In Lagos State, when you want to adopt in Lagos State, and I know a question most people ask is it just couples who can adopt in Lagos State? No, it is not just couples. Single people can also adopt, but you need to be at least 21 years older than the person you intend to adopt. And also, a male cannot adopt a female child, which of course I'm sure we can all understand why. But couples who intend to adopt in Lagos State must come together, must first resolve between themselves that they have decided to do this, because they would not deal with an individual or one person, one of the spouses. You must both go to the Ministry of Youth and Social Development in Alausa here in Lagos and register your interest or desire of the child. You would be asked to do an application letter, which is just a one-pager saying, I would like to adopt a child for such and such a reason. You would be interviewed just briefly, nothing major. You would just be asked a few questions by someone there in the ministry. You would be required to pay an administrative fee of 80,000. Bear in mind that everything I've told you could change tomorrow morning, because we live in an environment where things just keep changing. But the last we knew is what I'm telling you. So I would say always find out from the ministry. Now, they do what they call a home visit for everyone who wants to adopt, which is basically they come to your home, visit your home, and make sure that your environment is conducive for a child to stay in. And there's also a medical examination, which is required of you to go through at a Lagos State General Hospital, and you'll be told where. There is an adoption seminar, which is very, very important for everyone who wants to adopt to go through, because at that seminar, the Lagos state officials call in various experts in different areas, a doctor, legal practice. I've been called in once or twice to speak at such a seminar to educate people on what they're going into so that it's not on familiar grounds when you bring a child into your home. You will face a panel, nothing that serious, do not be afraid, but they would have about 5, 6 people who would ask you questions, nothing major, things you can answer. And at the end of this, you would be given a letter of provisional approval to adopt a child from any registered orphanage in Lagos State. You would also at the beginning of this process be given a list of basic requirements for adopting, such as your birth certificate, marriage certificate if you're married, the medical certificate of fitness, which I've just spoken about, proof of employment, including a photocopy of your identity card, to whom it may concern, letter from your employer, your letter of employment, recent pay slips for 6 months, your original statement of account for 6 months, 4 colored passport photographs, a tax clearance in Lagos State for 3 years, and that's basically it.
Fantastic. Now, our culture, I was watching something on YouTube the other day. Was it YouTube now or... Well, there was this story really of a guy who came across a baby that was left to die. And she was left there and people were just giving the baby food and left to die generally. And the guy just took the baby and the baby became his in court. Is that legal?
Well, I thought you said the baby died.
No, the baby, he saw a baby that was helpless. Yes, that was vulnerable, abandoned on the street.
Yes. And so it's not legal. It's not legal to do so. It's a very dangerous step to take. And I find that there's several people who do that in Nigeria. I've had a couple of people, or more than a couple of people, who have come to me. And they have teenagers with them who they took into their homes as babies, but have no legal documents for. It is wrong. It is kidnapping. It is, the law can come on you anytime. Should they be looking for a child and trace the child to you, you would be in trouble. So I advise people not to do that. In Lagos State, when you find a child on the streets, you take the child to the police station. You do not keep the child with you. And the police station knows what to do when such a child is found. And eventually it will contact the Ministry of Youth and Social Development. So it is illegal for you to take a child like that into your home.
Okay. Now, there's some people who have adopted children. So now, again, let me just say this. So, for example, if you're going to, because I was listening to a program on adoption the other day, and the lady just said exactly what you said. So assuming you are adopting a baby, she talked about the legal process of going to court and stuff like that. So if you're also adopting a baby, are you going to go to court with the baby, or that's what she said, that the baby would stay with you for a while, and you would see if you want. There's a probation period. Does it also happen with babies as well?
But you can take in a child into your home.
Yeah, like, when you're starting the adoption process, right? Or maybe I didn't hear correctly, or maybe I watched it from a film, but that there is a period of probation or something like that, where...
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, when you legally adopt a child and you're given the child to go home with, it is not permanent until after 3 months, when the social worker attached to you is certain that the child is being taken care of properly by you. At such a stage, after the 3 months, and the social worker from the Ministry of Youth and Social Development is satisfied with the bonding in your home, then you would be allowed to legalize the process. And at this stage, you will go to one of the Lagos state courts, they will tell you that, and there the judge or the person in charge, magistrate, will give you legal rights over the child and the documents that go with that. Then from that point, the child is legally yours. There is no fear, no one has the right to take that child away from you. And much as people complain a lot about the processes in Lagos State, I have to admit that, yes, I have been quite irritated about some of the things that happen, but it is very thorough. At the end of the day, they keep, sometimes a child comes into the heritage homes that's just a few days old. And Lagos State will make us keep going back to the place where the child was picked up, or go back, get some more information. And honestly, in some situations, this goes on until the child is 3. So that hurts me very much, but I guess they're just trying to make sure that all the loopholes have been covered, so that by the time you take this child home, you're certain that all that needs to be done has been done and the child is truly and legally yours. They give a window of even 3 months. If you, where people complain in Lagos State that you can't get a baby in Lagos State. And that's true, because if a child is 1 day old and is brought, left by the mother, of the child, and the child is brought into a home, Lagos State stipulates that we should allow 3 months within which the mother of the child can find the child. Because if the child's been abandoned, perhaps she just lost her child. So we give 3 months is given for that mother to look for her child, find her. After 3 months, then they now give you the right to have that child adopted.
Fantastic. So if you have a child that you've adopted and the child doesn't have a legal certificate from the courts, then that child doesn't belong to you.
No, the child doesn't belong to you. You're just keeping a child that doesn't belong to you. And anything can happen. One of the people who came to meet me, I guess she felt that she was safe and okay, but suddenly she wants the child to travel. So here we are. We need a passport. You need the birth certificate. You need all kinds of things. And then that's where the issue comes. And when you go to proper embassies, you can fiddle around with things while you're still in Nigeria, or when you don't need to go to an international organization like an embassy. But when you do need to go to the embassy, they're thorough, and you need to produce proper documents for that child. So you might have the child go to Dubai and some places where maybe they don't really need proper documentation, I don't know. But if you do need to go to the UK or the US and take that child along with you, you're going to need proper documentation.
Yeah, I think they're very thorough. I remember when I used to travel with my children, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes, at one point in the UK, towards the departure, they used to take pictures. There's a camera, and then sometimes they're talking to the kids, and then they would just call their middle names out. And the child says, oh, yes, it's me. So it's like, okay. So now next to the point, and listen, thank you very much for that elaborate, explanation. So can the child then, if you have, for example, you're a single parent, of course, you said a single parent can adopt a child, and you have to do a birth certificate for the child. How do you do the name for the child? So, for example, you're the mother, obviously your name will be there. What about the father? In the space of father, what do you put on the, in that space?
On the birth certificate?
Yeah, is it father unknown?
The child has been legally adopted. All rights as parents come into effect. So when the court gives you the legal document approving you as legal parents of this child, you can then use that document to get a proper birth certificate for the child with your names on the birth certificate. That's totally
fantastic. So now I have a few questions here by my audience. And listen, guys, if you have any questions, feel free to type the questions and I'm going to read it out and my guest will answer the question. Somebody says here, what's the adoption uptake in Nigeria today? And how does the process go and for how long?
Oh, I think we've answered that already.
We've answered that, yes. And someone says, yeah. So
the only thing we didn't answer, or I didn't speak about, was how long. And to be honest with you, it's not a question I can answer. It's only the ministry, and they honestly don't have an answer, to be honest, either.
I know it's a long process, yeah. So, and of course, you've also answered the question, can a single woman or a man adopt?
Okay, Ibi, we can say any time between 6 months and a year if you pursue the process without stopping yourself, because sometimes people start there, they can't get there, they don't have their tax clearance certificate, so they disappear for another how many months, and they come back and often say it takes so long. But if you have all of your documents too, it's not, it's okay. You would get through it within a year. And, I say to people who want to do this, don't be discouraged by that. It takes 9 months to have a baby. So if you spend 9 months getting this child, but I also understand the fact that most people who start this process have already waited for so long to have a biological child. So to wait again at this point, it can be very frustrating, but don't give up, just keep at it. And whatever starts has an end. So you will get your child, and the child that is for you, no other child.
Fantastic. So I have another question here that says, this is a contribution now. It says, I also thought I couldn't love a child I adopted, but after adopting, even my husband says I could not love even my own womb more than this precious child. I now believe God releases a special grace. Now, somebody asked here, and this is for parents who have adopted or people in the process of adoption. Now, is it advisable to tell the child they are adopted when they get older? When is the right age?
It's absolutely important that you tell the child that they're adopted, and not at an older age, right from scratch. And I get people saying, what do you mean from scratch? From the beginning. And I'll tell you what, I have a friend who doesn't mind me sharing this. He lives in England, and he was adopted at the age of 6 weeks. And I remember having a conversation with him, and I put the same question to him several years ago when I had started on this journey. And he said to me right from the day, I said, when did you know you were adopted? And he says, right from the beginning. And I say, what do you mean by right from the beginning? You were adopted at 6 weeks. And his answer was, he never remembers any time where he was sat down by his parents and told that he was adopted. That they started whispering the word adoption into his ears right from the word go. And the benefit of that is, and he said to me something that was very instructive. He says, Eme, I said to him, Barry, well, you don't understand adoption when they whisper that into your ear at 6 weeks. And he says, do you tell your 1-day-old child, I love you, when the child comes home with you or when the child is brought out of your womb? And I said, yes. He says, just the same way, it's registering somewhere. And the whole idea is to get the word adoption to be normal to the child. You don't want a moment where you sit a child down and say to the child, and you call a conference where every member of your extended family is there, and then you begin to say to the child, you were adopted. That can communicate, there's something unusual about this, there's something strange about this. I don't think any of us sits a child down and says, oh, you came through cesarean, let's call all the family members and say blah, blah, blah. So basically, my advice usually is start right from the beginning, whispering, oh, we feel so blessed we adopted you when you're hugging that baby. Oh, we're so blessed you came into a family, we're adopted, adoption, adoption, adoption. So that it's a natural word in the child's life and vocabulary. Now, I say to people, when your child gets to the age where you start reading bedtime stories to your child, start with the story of Moses or Esther in the Bible or Jesus. Tell them the story, read the story to them about that, and introduce the word adoption there, because the Bible doesn't specifically mention adoption, but we know that Pharaoh's daughter took Moses when she found Moses in the basket. That's adoption, took the child home. So you say, you know, Moses was adopted just like you were adopted. Now the child would just look at you and smile, because the word doesn't mean anything if the child is just 2 years old. And much later, you would find in the course of doing this work, we've come across people who said that they did this, and somewhere along the line, at the age of 3, 4, the child says, Mom, what, something, I was adopted. And the mom is shocked at that. But you see, you had been communicating that over the months, years, and it's sinking down somewhere. And the child grows with that knowledge. The challenge we have is when you begin to tell a teenager that the child is adopted. And what we have seen is that, first and foremost, we know that at teenage age, children are beginning to deal with all kinds of things.
Hormones, yeah.
Hormones, they're trying to find out who they are. They have issues. We all know teenagers have issues. So why would you want to pile this layer on the child at that stage? And then you now blame adoption. You say, oh, the child is now reacting because I told the child they're adopted. The child would have reacted anyway as a teenager because they're going through all kinds of things.
Hormonal rages, yeah.
Yes, so do this well before your child becomes a teenager, even before your child starts going to school. I'll address a situation where you adopt an older child. That's a different situation. But if the child has come to you preschool age, please get the information into your child's head way before that child goes to school. Because when you are communicating adoption to the child, you will be doing so in the right way. But when the child goes to school, textbooks hardly, they don't talk about adoption as one of the methods a child can come into a family. I'm still working on that. I'm still working on seeing how that can be put in textbooks in Nigeria, because children need to understand that it's just not one way of a child coming to a family, that adoption is one of the ways, and it's beautiful and it's good. So if you start by educating your child and equipping your child well, when the child goes to school and starts school, there's some stage in school where they begin to talk about how families are formed. Now, when the teacher talks about how, oh, mommy has you in the belly, it's most likely that your child would say, excuse me, teacher, that's not the only way, and would educate his or her teacher. And most responsible teachers will quickly put that into their lesson and say, yes, I forgot this. But what you have done is you have equipped your child to stand against this tough world that does not yet accept adoption as they ought to. So it's absolutely important that you start the process very early. And another reason why you should do that is, remember, when you went to adopt this child, you were not the only one who had this information. There were people in the orphanage. We try and make sure confidentiality is kept, and so far, so good, because the files are locked up. We have our procedures and processes, but not all orphanages have this. And you must have told 1 or 2 people here and there, your family members, and they would mention something, could be talking one day, and their child hears. And it's usually, it usually comes out in a negative way when a third party does it, because it's one cousin who is irritated with you. And
yeah.
And they bring it out in a spiteful way. You're not really my auntie's child anyway. You know, you don't want that. So you want to be in control of things and equip your child properly to face people who would try and make him or her feel bad. And before I close on this topic, I remember a story I was told by one of our members in the Heritage Homes Orphanage, Mrs. Bami Obasonya, someone I have tremendous respect for and learned a lot from her, because she had done adoption and fostering in the UK as a social worker for some 35 years before she came to support us in the Heritage Homes Orphanage. And she told me a story, two stories that would drive the message home very clearly. And one was about an adult who, let me start with a child who was adopted. And this child was playing in, you know, one of those high rises there in London. And with another child, and they, you know, got into the sort of things kids will get into. And the other child says to the child who was adopted, "You were adopted anyway." And the child turns back and says to the child who says that, "Yes, I was adopted. I have two mommies, my tummy mommy and my real mommy. And you have just one mommy." And the other child raced off crying home, because this child had been well equipped by his parents to answer anyone. What if that child did not know he was adopted? What would have happened at that stage? You get total distrust from your child from that moment onwards, because the child knows you have kept this very important information away. The child does not know what other information you'll be keeping away. The child will not trust you. You begin to have issues with your adoption, and then we all blame it on the fact that, you know, these are adopted children, this is how they are. They would eventually change, they would eventually do this, they would eventually do that. No, it's not that. It's just that you did not take charge and do things properly from the beginning. And then the second story.
No, continue, I'm listening. It's an education.
Yes, the second story I was told, and these are real life stories that happened there in the UK, in her experience as a social worker for 30-something years. The other one is about an adult who was adopted and wasn't told he was adopted. And he's in his 40s or 50s, I can't remember now, burying his mother. And while they were round the grave, burying the mother, they just finished, put her down in the ground, and were walking away. A senile auntie turns around and says to him, "I remember when you were brought from the orphanage." And of course, you can imagine his reaction. A 50-something-year-old never knew he was adopted. This senile auntie says, "I remember when you were brought from the orphanage." And suddenly, his whole world comes crumbling down. I understand he sat on the floor, used his bare hands to begin to dig his mother's grave. And he was screaming and saying, "My whole life has been a lie. My whole life has been a lie. How could she have done this?" And I don't think he's going to love that woman or her memories. I doubt it. So the wonderful job she did now has turned out to be bad, because she held this all-important information from this child. There is no fear in love. And what are some of the things people fear in telling the child? "Oh, the child would run off and leave me." No, the child will not run off and leave you if you've done a good job. If you genuinely love that child, if you've genuinely taken care of the child. And you know what? It's natural for everyone to want to know where their roots are from. It's natural. Put yourself in the child's position. You know that you have parents out there. You're curious. Do I look like them? You know, do I speak like them? In some cases, like in the case of my friend who was adopted at 6 weeks, he doesn't mind me mentioning his name, Barry. Barry's tall. Barry's like a 6'5", sorry, Barry is. And everyone in his family were all like 5'8", 5-something, 5. So he knew. I mean, he knew eventually when he's biological, and he said to me, "You know, when I met my biological father, his mom had passed away, biological mom. He said, I call him by his first name. He's not daddy to me. He's, let's say his name is George. He's just George. It's about the time you spend together. It's not about the name mommy or daddy. It's not about carrying that child in your womb or not. If you carry a child in your womb and give up the child and come back 30 years after, it's not the same thing. You cannot. There was a very sad story, situation in America of a child, Mobe or so she was called. I'm sure a number of you saw it because it's a recent thing. She was kidnapped from the hospital.
Yeah.
Yes, you saw that. Yes. Her mom went to have her in the hospital, and somebody walks into the room who pretends to be a nurse, takes the baby away, and that was it. Until 20 years after, when the child begins to, I can't remember, she needed something and she mentioned to a friend, and the friend let it out to the authorities, and they came after the woman after 20 years of having that child in America, you know? But guess what? When the whole thing blew up, like you can imagine, it went to court. The adoptive mother, I don't want to call her adoptive, the mom who kidnapped her was taken to jail, brought to court. The child was crying for the woman who kidnapped her. Her biological mother showed up and father. Sad situation for those ones. I felt so much for them. But they were not there, not because they didn't want to be there in their situation. The woman kidnapped the child, but the child has all their allegiance to this woman because the woman took care of her. The woman loved her. The woman provided for her. The woman did everything. I hate to use that example because I was hurt as a mother that somebody would steal my child, and then my child would be loving on the woman who stole her and gave me so much pain. But that drives the point about when you take care of the child properly, whether you stole the child or not, unfortunately, the child would love you. The child would be curious to find out about her origins. And honestly, have a large heart enough to allow that. Go with your child. If it's going to make your child a more whole person, if it's going to heal the gap in your child's life, I think you should love your child enough to do that for your child. I have a friend who's late now. And when her child is in her 20s now, and she died about 3-4 years ago, so they had started having this conversation. And the child one day was looking out of the window, and she would do that. And her mom said to her, I know, you're wondering if that woman is your biological mother, Abi? So her daughter laughed and said, hey, mommy, you self, and she said, no, let's have a conversation. It opened up a conversation. And the daughter said to her mom, if I wanted to go and look for my biological mom, would you allow me? Her mom said, I will go with you. 100% I would allow you. We would go and find her. And she says, if I want to stay with her, she says, I will let you. But I'll come and look for you. You must visit me. And they laughed. By the time you do that and you're that free about it, I don't think that the curiosity goes after a while. The child would want to see. And when they see, they will come back because you've done a good job. They would want to, yes, do things for their mom. And she said, my friend said, we will build a house or get a house for your mom, your birth mom, and we will support her as much as we need to support her. And, none of us own these children, not even the biological ones we have. We're just custodians. And we all know anyone who has older children, you know that after a while, they get on with their lives and they don't even in their space. I mean, you can identify with that. So why do we want to hold any child down? My 18-year-old son doesn't even, want to. I'm calling him and he's like, Mom, I'm busy. I'll speak to you later. And I'm like, So you really sort of own them in the first 15 or so years. After that, you just have to trust God and let go.
Thank you so much. Listen, Mrs. Akenzua, you've put so much perspective into this. And I suppose the reason why a lot of people are afraid to tell the children is the fear that if I tell my child, would the child love me more? Would the child want to leave me and go to her own biological parents? And so what you've done is just to open up our minds to free us from this whole concept of like holding on. And even our biological children, you're so right. Like they call you when they want to call you, they come when they want to come. So you can't really hold them back. And that's kind of like true. So assuming like somebody hasn't told their child and the child is maybe 20, how can that conversation, is it too late? What is it not better to just leave it and just say it in the will? You know, I don't know, to be honest.
So it's not better to leave it, 100% not better to leave it. It's more difficult. I would say to such a parent, you need to be counseled first, because we need to address the peculiarities of that particular situation, because we're not dealing with one cookie fits all, where I can say to you, for every toddler, open up a storybook on adoption and just talk to the child. Then you're in better control. But now the child has formed a piece of a character. There's a lot of influences that have come into the child's life. We will need to understand the peculiar circumstances with the child before we can advise you on what to do. But the good part is that they are a team of people, including myself, who would be very happy to help such people. So Ivy, I would leave, of course you have my details, and there's several other people, Mrs. Bridget Isweli, who's a counselor in this field and has been so for over 40 years, thereabouts. There are several other people, Mrs. Oshuntoku in the Heritage Homes. We have a whole team of people in the Heritage Homes, Mrs. Bami Obasonya, whom I mentioned. These are all people who have great experience, and we would be happy to help you navigate that terrain. But no, it's never too late. Please do not leave it any day longer. Do it. You don't want a child to hate your memory when you're gone. You want the child to remember you well and continue to bless God for the wonderful work you did in the child's life.
Fantastic. Now, I have a few comments here that I want to read, and it's been a very inspiring night. Somebody says here, this is so inspiring and educative. Thank you so much, ma'am. You are always an inspiration. I look forward to having my next baby via adoption by God's grace. And someone says, and someone says, thank you. They are just reiterating what you said. They said they are gifts. They are not ours after all, biological or not. And someone says here, let me see. Someone says here, this question was, what if we hadn't told the child and the child is 20? And you've already answered the question here. And someone says, I'm in awe of your incredible love and knowledge, as well as advocacy on this subject. Thank you so much for sharing this with us. Now, listen, you have said so much that I was just listening and listening and listening. Like I have actually, learned a lot. And listen, this is incredible. But then I just want to say to my viewers that if you have any more questions, any questions at all, please feel free to text those questions and I will read them. Now, Mrs. Akenzua, you have your a book that you wrote about the joy of adoption. So assuming somebody here is listening and wants to get hold of that book, how will they find it?
I would leave the the details for people who would like to get the book. It's a good book. It talks a lot. It gives a lot of details about. It's called the ABC of adoption, and it talks a lot about the processes, what you should do from the moment you start to think about this process. Some of the things we haven't covered, and I'm happy to continue if we have time to talk about.
Yeah, I want us to cover those things because we still have a few more minutes. So I want us to cover, those things that we haven't covered. And I just want to say something else before I forget, that in case somebody is here and they want to listen more on you, because you have your, is it weekly or monthly?
Yes. We have a discussion webinar like this once a month, the first Sunday of every month. Yes.
So please feel free to just send it to me, and then I will also post it in my social media handle so people are well aware of what is happening, so people can be well educated on adoption and why adoption is a blessing. So I want us to just, speak a bit more than on the joys. There are some things that you didn't cover. It would be nice for you to cover them.
Yes, well, I would like to say to anyone who's thinking of going on this journey that it is a worthwhile journey. It's a blessing. You must first, because most people in our society who adopt children are people who have faced barrenness or have issues, infertility issues. You must first and foremost resolve that before you go to adopt, because it's a painful period in anyone's life. I spent 7 years waiting for my child. I had 4 miscarriages, nearly lost my life. One of the babies, and when I say miscarriages, I'm not talking about 2 weeks or a month, 5.5 months. I would carry the baby and the baby will come down. This children was actually born and lived for 90 minutes before she passed away there in the UK. So I understand the pain of having to wait for a child. It's real, and it's a journey I do not wish on my enemy. It's a painful time. It's a time when you really can't understand what's going on, because you see other people having their children, going into hospitals, coming out like no big deal, and then you keep losing or you can't even get pregnant. It's awful, but don't give up. And, I say to people that sometimes, hard as this might be for you to swallow, there are people whom God has ordained to work this path.
You and I had that conversation.
Yeah, it's a difficult one to swallow, but it's real. Use me, God. And he turns up to use you. And it's difficult for you to accept that this can be a way. And why do I say that? Unfortunately, if God is speaking to you and I about adopting without the problem, we wouldn't do it, would we? No. Most of us will not be like Joseph, who was magnanimous enough to accept a child that was not his own right from the onset. Mind you, she was just betrothed to him. So he could have changed his mind, and he was on that path, but moved by the Spirit of God, accepted that child. I applaud the man Joseph, an extraordinary human being. He took that woman in, bore the shame, because we know now that Jesus was put into the womb of Mary by the Holy Spirit. It wasn't known in those days. He had to live with all of that. But the point I'm trying to make here is that some of us would just be chosen by God to do this. The children who have been born into this world, and we can't wish them away. They're here already. And God needs somebody to take care of these children. And he looks through the earth and says, I can trust Mary. She would do it for me. So I'm going to withhold a biological child from this person for a season in some cases. In some cases, he would say, this is the best I have for you. Biological will not be as good as this. And I'm going to have people who have walked this path, including myself, can attest to this, that God does incredible things that we do not understand. So he allows this happen just to bless you, not to do you harm. When you've resolved that and said to yourself, okay, this is where I am. God wants me to do this. Go into it joyfully. Get all the counseling, the therapy you need to get over the trauma of not being able to have a child biologically. Because you don't want to go and pick up a child and start projecting your pain, the challenges you have, your deep wounds from not being able to have a biological child. It will tell, you know. And in some cases, some people just go and take Ibi. They go because people, especially here in Western Yoruba land, they will say, there's a name they have for such kids, and they will bring you luck. Go and adopt. And I'm sure you've heard about that, that when you adopt, you will have your own.
Yeah, there's a saying like that. There's this general belief.
It's so unfair because it's like you're using
a trade-off.
Yes, it's terrible, in my opinion, that you should want to use a child because you want your biological child. No, don't go into adoption like that. You will not enjoy it and you will not get the benefits that God has for you from adoption. Go into it knowing that this is what God wants me to do. At this time, God has not failed me. Because a lot of Christians believe that if they accept to go on the journey of adoption, they are saying God has failed them. We Christians don't even help them because we begin to make them look like they lack faith in God. Sister, you're going to adopt. Has God stopped giving children biologically? Can't you keep trusting God? I will fast with you more. I will pray with you more. You're standing in the way of what God wants to do in the life of that couple or woman or man, and in the life of a child who's out there. What if Pharaoh's daughter did not take Joseph into the palace? It would have been impossible for Moses, to stand before Pharaoh if he had not been groomed in the palace. What country? He would not have been able to an Israelite slave, come and stand before Pharaoh and say, let my people go. No, it was all in God's plan. What if that woman had not done that and had said, no, she would leave the baby in the basket, but God wanted it so that Moses will come into Pharaoh's house, understand the home, know that there's no big deal about Pharaoh or the palace, so that he could come back and demand that Pharaoh should let God's people go. So you don't know what you're stopping when you do not obey God and go out on that journey of adoption. When you've resolved it, trust God. Open your heart up. Know that this is a child from God. We say children are a reward of the womb. You know, it doesn't mean your womb. They're just a gift of the womb. Any womb, that's the gift. But that gift comes to you, another womb carried the gift, and God brings it. Another way of looking at adoption is that you can choose the sex you want.
Exactly, I was going to say that. You can choose.
You can choose. But when you carry a child in your womb, you can't choose. If the child comes out is looking like this, looking like that, you have to keep that child. But with adoption, you can choose. You can choose sex. You can go back for a boy if you have a girl. You know, with adoption, you can choose even to have, let's say you're in your 50s, Ibi, and you just didn't think about all of this and decide to adopt today. And most of your friends have teenagers already. You can choose to adopt a teenager. So you immediately have a big child that you can gist with, laugh with, take to school, do parties with, travel with, and all of that. That's the joy of adoption. That's one of the benefits of adoption that I didn't mention earlier. Yeah. So there's so many. I hope I remember more. So embrace it with an open heart, with joy in your heart, saying, I'm taking Jesus into my home. When you were hungry, when I was hungry, you fed me. When I was naked, you clothed me. So definitely, you know, Jesus is not going to come down from heaven and require your food or your clothes. When you do it for any one of these little ones, you do it for me. So know that when you take that child in, you're taking Jesus into your home. And you can only be blessed when you have the right frame of mind when you're doing this. Yes, but if you take, hey, I don't know what this child is coming me to. What if this child is demonized and in the night she will try to start all over
the child has bubble. Since that's something that you said, right? That resonated with me so much, because a lot of times people don't understand that they have trauma, and someone has been believing God or wanting to have a baby for a very long time. Some people have waited for 10 years, 15 years, thereabout, and then so they now want to have the child. And so you're saying that before you even adopt, right? And if you've had a long period of waiting to have a child, that it is important that you have counseling or go to therapy.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes, it is, absolutely, because I have been through it. It's a difficult place to be in. And you really do need to speak to somebody, get it in your mind. You haven't failed as a woman because you couldn't have a child. Life happens. All of that therapy is required. And you need to bring it all out with a therapist, talk to somebody. Christian therapists, I would always recommend, so they bring in God's perspective into things, and be wholesome before you go on this journey.
Yeah, it's important, to be wholesome. Yes.
Yes. And let me not make light of the fact that there are issues when you adopt an older child. There could be serious issues, because remember, this child has been through perhaps one or two institutions, and along the way could have picked up habits there. Now, what I say is you would need patience. We would not usually give a child who's in their teens or 8, 10 to a couple who's just starting, young couple who have never experienced taking care of any child at all. We wouldn't do that. We would give such a child to an older couple, and in most cases, we would have established the fact that this couple have taken care of their nieces, nephews, different people. They understand the challenges of raising an older child. And you would need to just be very patient, prayerful. Like I always say and still maintain, biological children steal. Biological children tell lies.
Can be rude.
They can be rude. They
can be dirty.
Yes, all kinds of challenges. So why do we isolate children who are adopted and make it sound as if they're the ones with all of these problems? Yes, I agree. Rejection is a major one you would have to deal with, because that child has probably moved from here to there. But hey, it happens with biological children as well. So the good part is that there is counsel. We have support systems in place now to be able to help people like that navigate through that terrain. So when you adopt a child from the heritage homes at that age, we're there supporting you, as much as you would allow us to do, so that the adoption doesn't break. We take no delight in the adoption breaking. So we're committed to make sure that all adoptions through us work. And not just through us. I've been called out to families who are having a crisis. And usually the crisis is that the child has found out from a third party. That's why I would never stop advocating for tell. Because that's all I'm called into. Big families, wealthy families here and there in Lagos. I have to go in, sit down, talk. And each time I leave, I say, we tell people who adopt, please come attend our seminars. But the moment they carry their children, so of course, before they take a child from heritage homes, we make sure we take them through these grueling sessions, because we don't want the adoption to break. But you know what? When they take the child, it is that they don't want us to have anything to do with them again until they encounter a problem. And the problem is usually one that they would not have needed to encounter if they had continued, attending these seminars from time to time. I'm not saying you'll be available for all, but as much as possible, even if you don't want to be seen here, go later.
Use a pseudonym or something,
Yeah. Go on later and just watch the video. and make sure you know what you're supposed to know so that the adoption works and you don't blame it on the child.
Fantastic, sis. There's something that I call you sis. I couldn't help myself, it has come out finally. So there's something that you've said that I think that is very, very important. And speaking from a Christian perspective as well, from a Christian background, that a lot of Christians shame women when they go for adoption, in the sense that, and you said it rightly when you said, don't you believe the Lord enough that the Lord can give you a child biologically, the kind of way. And so why are you going to adopt? I think that we just have to speak to that nonsense to stop.
Exactly.
It's that nonsense.
Just the Christians. Unfortunately, it's the pastors. It starts with them. Yes, I will be honest. I'm blunt, Ivy. I will tell it as it is. It's the pastors. The responsibility is on them from the pulpit to begin to speak concerning adoption, and letting people know it's
free
fine.
People, yeah.
And not shame women who can't have. I mean, you have a woman in your congregation who's going around with a face like Jesus has just died this morning. For 20 years, she's walking around, she's in her 50s, 60s, and she would not take this step because she knows what you're all going to say. Sister, you stop trusting God. God can still do it. We give them this false hope, in most cases. Why do I say false hope? Because sometimes some people have just been ordained to walk this journey and they're never going to have a child. Sorry, I'm not trying to be pessimistic. There are people who would not have biological children, at the end of the day. So I think the counsel should be, sister, let's pray and ask God what he wants us to do. And the sooner we do that and discover that this is the path God has called you to walk, you go that path and get the support of the pastor and everybody. We tell people who come to adopt in the Heritage Homes Orphanage, please do not hide and come and collect your child. We will not accept that. Come with your family members. Come dancing. Come praising God. Because God has just done a miracle. Do you know that there are people who want to adopt and cannot even get a child to adopt? They've been at this journey. So even adoption is a miracle. It's a miracle that you would have a child. I remember the first lady who came to adopt in the Heritage Homes Orphanage. I've never forgotten this woman. Her child now is about 19 or 20 years old. It was just beautiful. I was shocked. She felt when we started, because we would pray, we would worship God, we will dance, we will celebrate. And I do that with tears coming down my eyes. Initially, it used to be because this child is going, oh my God. Then the other members will be saying to me, amen. Then the child go and Tigami will say, are you going to come and take care of the child here? But you started bonding with this child already.
Yeah.
But any woman goes down on the floor and she's rolling in the orphanage and shouting, Jesus, Jesus, you find me worthy to give a child to today. This is adoption. She was overjoyed that God would entrust the child into her hands. That was a beautiful beginning for us in the Heritage Homes Orphanage. And we encourage everyone to do the same. And we say, when you go home with your child, yes, initially, this is an advice I would want to give everybody. Please make sure you're the primary carer of that child for at least 3 months. Even if you have a nanny, let the nanny do the washing, the preparing of the bottles, the ironing of the clothes and all of that. But keep that child close to yourself and your spouse, because remember, you haven't carried this child for 9 months. The bonding process must start immediately and it must be tight. If you have a third party taking care of the child, you're communicating again to this child. No permanency, it's another adult. Remember, the child has left the biological mom, been in an orphanage where there's several people caring for the child. So you need to quickly establish that bond and that intimacy with the child so that the child begins to understand that this is the person who's going to be there. So we say to people who come to adopt in the Heritage Homes Orphanage, please try and get your maternity leave before you adopt this child, because offices now give maternity leave to adoptive parents. Thank God for that. And most major offices, it's something that is still growing, so that you're at home and can give the child all of the time that is required, like you would do if you brought a biological child home. And celebrate the child. So in those first few months, try and don't have people coming in and out. Try and keep the child close to you, especially if it's a toddler. You don't want the child flustered, confused, people
with a lot of
out.
people around, yeah.
Yeah. Keep it quiet. Be there, the three of you, or you and your child, if you're a single parent who's adopting, and let the child get used to you. And then celebrate the child. Have an open, nice dedication. That's a wonderful way of introducing your child to everyone and shutting every mouth out there that will be talking. You see, when you keep things secret, then people begin to talk behind you and are like, hey, did you hear? Did you hear? But if you send out a nice WhatsApp text saying, join us at the dedication of our 3-year-old daughter that God has blessed us with, you know, and immediately people know it's adoption. You don't need to use the word, you know, and let them come out and dance with you and celebrate this wonderful gift that God has given to you, that you didn't need to labor for 9 months to get.
Oh my God.
I forgot to mention, you didn't labor for 9 months. God just came and gifted you this wonderful child. You know, hey, there are ways of looking at things. You can look at the cup as half empty or half full. If you look at it as half full, that's the way it would be. Everyone would take your thing. They say how you carry your calabash. There's a saying in Nigeria. It's how other people will carry your calabash for you. So if you're hiding, ashamed of this child, you know, looking over your shoulders, everyone will be whispering behind you. But if you come out and celebrate, have the whole church dance with you, celebrate this wonderful gift, there's nothing to talk about again. When anyone, I didn't hear that you have a child, though. When did you have the, you were not at the dedication, sister. You didn't come and dance with us.
It just shuts your mouth. Since listen, this conversation is just too much. Let me just read what somebody said here, reiterating what you said. She said, real nonsense. A pastor told me that, asking why is it because you don't believe you will marry and have your own kids. Even when I explained it's been a selfless desire for 10 years, it's exactly a miracle. You know, so she's just saying that, you know, a lot of people, a lot of pastors are not educated enough to let people know that this thing is a good thing. And also, like you said, you know, like even my husband as a pastor also says this as well. He advises, like, you know, there's some older singles, older women that can adopt, you know, the kind of way, like, so you're not married, but then you can adopt and give love to a child, you know? Fantastic.
That's so true.
Yeah. Yeah. So our time is 3 minutes up. We have just how many more minutes now? A few more minutes to go. I just want to say thank you very much for today's conversation. And the joy, when you speak about the joy of adoption, it's palpable. And please send me the details of the counselors, counselors that people can meet if they have experienced trauma, and where can we get your book? Can we get your book in Amazon? Is there any soft copy so that I can put it out on my social media handles? I just want to say that it's been a fantastic evening. And listen, if you're listening to this program and you haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel is Ibinabo Enebi. Subscribe, and you can also follow me on my social media handles, Ibinabo Enebi, on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, and on what's it called now, TikTok. I try to do TikTok. So thank you very much, everybody. I appreciate you. And Mrs. Akenzua, any last words? We have just a few more minutes.
Well, I just want to leave this with anyone who has doubts there in their mind. Pray about it, find out from God what He wants you to do. And if He wants you to adopt, please go about it. You will never regret it. because we have experienced the joy of adoption. God bless you.
Fantastic, fantastic. Thank you, sis. I'm going to call you, and bye, everybody. Bye.